Today I'm going to walk you through how to build a really popular end-fed half-wave antenna kit. Stay tuned and you'll find out which kit that I have. The antenna kit that we're going to build today is none other than the K6ARK 100 watt end-fed half-wave antenna kit. Now these are a little bit hard to get, and I did not actually purchase this. I won this in a giveaway from Josh Naz over at the Ham Radio Crash Course. And thanks for the sticker. And thanks for the giveaway. Now let's jump over to the overhead. I'll show you what tools you need, what are recommended, and all of the parts that are included in this kit. The tools that you're going to need to complete this kit are a soldering iron, solder, flux is not required but recommended, a solder sucker is not required but highly recommended in case you make a mistake. You will need a pair of wire cutters. You may need a pair of needle nose pliers, not required but recommended. The other thing I recommend having is a multimeter to test everything as you go. And before I forget, the other thing that's not required but extremely handy is a pair of helping hands. Now these can be picked up at like Harbor Freight or ordered on Amazon for real cheap. This pair is, I believe, from Harbor Freight, and they work pretty well. So let's clear this stuff out of the way for now, and then let's dig into this kit. Of course, you've got the K6ARK sticker. Enclosed in here is the toroid. Now this is another tool that you may need, some kind of razor knife, to scrape the enamel off of your wire. And here is the enamel coated magnet wire. And the magnet wire is 22 gauge. This is your piece of 18 gauge poly stealth wire. This will be used for your counterpoise and to connect your antenna to. This is the heat shrink, the 2-inch heat shrink tubing. And this is going to go around your finished end-fed half-wave build or 9-to-1 build, or however you want to end up building this antenna. And this is another piece of 3/4 inch heat shrink tubing. And this is a plastic form in case you want to build a coil for your antenna. And all of these pieces go to this SO239. Here is the circuit board. And here's a nice little close-up of this circuit board. And as you can see, most of the areas are labeled. This is the little area where you're going to put your surface mount capacitor. Antenna goes here on the ANT port, counterpoise over here on the counterpoise area. These two holes are for a strain relief. And if we flip this over, you can see your in, ground, out, your center pin for your SO239. And Adam has everything extremely nicely labeled on this. This kit should be a really easy build. And then we also have our spacer, little plastic spacer that's going to go over the top of the SO239 and hold the toroid. And the last part that we have is just a little piece of heat shrink tubing. All right, we're going to start with step number 1, and that is install this little capacitor on these two pads. In the directions, it recommends putting just a little dab of solder on one of the pads. And that is what I'm going to do. All right. Got my little dab of solder on the pads. I'm going to use my tweezers and set this on there. I'm going to try to hold it while I'm heating the solder back up. All right, I've got one side soldered. And now it's time to apply a little bit of heat and some solder to the other side. All right, there we go. Let's test to make sure it's on there. I'm going to take a quick look at this. And it appears that we've got some good solder joints there. All right, let's move on to step number 2. All right, step number 2, we're going to be installing this piece of poly stealth wire on the in the antenna hole. This piece is also going to be used for the counterpoise, so we need to fold it in half and then make one side a little longer than the other. That way you can tell which one is which. I'm going to end up putting the longer piece on the antenna side and the shorter piece on the counterpoise side. And I forgot to mention, when I was going through the tools, you do need a wire stripper. I did have to go run and grab mine. Completely forgot about it. But now we need to strip all 4 ends of the poly stealth wire. And you only need about 1/8 of an inch or so. One wire down. And the other wire's done. So as you can see, I do have one wire that is longer than the other. So my short one is going to be my counterpoise, and my longer one is going to be my antenna wire. Now we're going to solder the antenna wire into this port, and we're actually going to, and as you can see, this is labeled on both sides. The side that you want to solder to is this side. So you'll stick your wire in from the bottom and solder right there. Now these helping hands are helping out quite a bit, because I can set this board just like so, and the wire is actually in the port of the little hole. All right, we are soldered. You definitely want to check your work as you go. I'm going to attempt to clean this up just a little bit. That is good enough. Now, the other end of your antenna wire has to come back up and go through this little hole right there. It's a little hard to see. Feed it up like so. Being careful not to damage your wire jacket or kink the wire. All right, I've got that run right up through that hole, and I'm ready to go on to the next step. The next step is putting in the counterpoise. We're going to follow the exact same process. I'm using the helping hands to help hold that wire in there so I can get a good solder joint. Now, time to inspect the work to make sure we've got good coverage. And it looks like we do. So, got to feed this end back up through this little hole. All right. Got the antenna and the counterpoise wires attached. Kind of bend them down and out of my way for the moment. Our next step is to install this SO239 connector, and in the instructions it says that this washer with the ground lug on it is not going to be used, so you can either set it aside or throw it away. All right, so on this connector, you have your nut and a washer, and these are the only two things we're going to use. Now, the connector, as you can see, there is a little notch right there, and your SO239 has the same little notch on it to help line it up. Just like that, and we're going to put the washer on and the nut, and then go ahead and just tighten everything up. It doesn't have to be super tight, but just tight enough to where it's not going to come loose. And now we need to take a piece of this magnet wire and attach it from the center pin to the center pin labeled area on the board. And you only need about an inch or so of the magnet wire to make this work. Now, one thing you will need to do is take this red enamel off. And my preferred method of doing it is with a razor knife. All right, I've got that. I've got that removed. Looks like I missed a spot. Yeah, I've got that all removed, and you can kind of tell that there is you can see the copper underneath when you know you've got the enamel removed. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the enamel from the other side. And you only have to remove the enamel on the side going to the board, just a little bit of it, not a whole lot. All right, got that removed. Now let's go ahead and solder this inside of the center pin. Got the center pin soldered and it feels good and solid. Let's bend this piece around and get it in there. Now we have to make sure that this little piece right here will sit down on there and allow this to not touch the little bolt or the nut on the SO239. And it looks like that is going to work. And I am going to need to take a little bit more enamel off of my wire. All right, got that soldered, and now I need to use my flush cutters to take that off. Just like so. All right, now that we have the center pin all soldered, let's go and take a look at and test everything to make sure we've got continuity. To make sure we've got continuity between where we want to have continuity and make sure we don't have continuity where we don't want it. All right, you want to set your multimeter to 200 ohms of resistance. And we're going to measure from the antenna wire to the in port. And we've got continuity there, which is good. We do not have continuity between there and the ground. And we don't have continuity yet between the antenna and the in port. So I misspoke. This one is the out port to the antenna, continuity. Nothing between antenna and ground. Nothing yet to antenna and in, which is fine. Now we want to measure from in to the center pin. And we've got continuity there. And ground to the counterpoise. And we've got continuity there. So far, so good. Nothing is messed up quite yet. Now we need to check to make sure this little plastic hat sits on here just fine. Looks like it sits good. The red enamel wire for the center pin sits in there. It sits flush on, the little hat sits on top, flush, and the red enamel wire is not rubbing against the nut of the SO239. So we are all good to move on to the dreaded winding of a toroid. I'm going to move this out of my way. Now we want to unwind our magnet wire, being careful not to kink it. We're going to start with an inch or so of magnet wire sticking out of the middle, and we are going to wind 2 turns in a counterclockwise motion. Now, I would recommend trying to make sure you do this as tight as you can because it's going to help in the long run. So there was 1 turn. And in his instructions, it does say to create a tap, which we want to just kind of back this one back out just a little bit and give it a few twists. And that is our tap. We need to do another 14 turns around the toroid, and we are done winding at that point. And you want to make sure that you're not crossing over if you can avoid it. Really won't matter that much unless you knock the enamel off of the wire, and then it will make a big difference. See, I'm getting there. Trying to keep this as tight as I can. I'm about halfway there. I've got 7 so far. I need another 7. And we're coming around to our last turn. Got everything pretty tight. I just need to make sure nothing is crossed over. Everything looks good on the inside. I just trim this off to help me out in the next step on getting this mounted to the PCB. So this is the in. According to all of his documentation, this will be the in wire. It'll go to the in hole. This is the ground wire. And this last one is the out wire. I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. And let's go ahead and test fit this on the circuit board. Go ahead and pop our little hat on there. All right, I've got the wires bent over to kind of help hold it, but this is roughly about how the finished product is going to look. And all I've got to do is just get these 3 soldered, and I'm going to be done with this portion of the video because I've got to put an antenna on this side and set this up if I want to run a counterpoise. And then set my antenna, tune my antenna to whatever band I decide to choose to run. But let's get the enamel scraped off of these so I can get this soldered. And I am bending these wires kind of the opposite way so I can scrape off more enamel on the other side without having to disassemble this. Alright, got the enamel scraped off. And I'm going to trim these down just a little bit more. And I am going to get them soldered. Let's inspect our work. Looks like everything is soldered. I need to add more to this twisted pair side. That should do it. All right, all the holes look like they're filled. My cap back on my SO239 so I don't get any junk in there. But now you'll want to go out and get your antenna either soldered on or use some kind of like banana plug connector or a spade connector or something to get your antenna on this side. If you feel like you want to run a counterpoise, go ahead and put another plug on this, whatever kind of plug you want to use on this side, and go ahead and cut it to whatever length you want on that for your band. And then the one thing I am going to do in these two holes here, this is for like a strain relief for a little rope. I am going to put one in there. Don't know if paracord will fit in there, but I've got some bank line that'll work. That's good for a couple 100 pounds. So, and then afterwards, this is what ends up going on it over top of everything, and you'll hit it with a heat gun, shrink it, and it'll hold everything together and be a nice compact little package. After going back through the instructions and stuff and looking at some stuff, I did figure out that I put the counterpoise wire on the upside down compared to his instructions, but it's soldered in the correct spot and it should work just fine. One thing I probably should do is check to see if I've got continuity all the way from the center pin out to the antenna wire. Yes, I do. And how about from the shield to the counterpoise? I do, so this should work just fine. And thanks for watching. This, you want to build one of these kits, this is by far the easier kit, the 100-watt version. Not too bad to put together. Everything, it is a little tight, but it's definitely doable. Don't know that I'd recommend it for a beginner, but kind of a high beginner, low intermediate soldering kit, I would recommend it. He also, Adam, shout out to Adam K6ARK. Check out his website. He's got a 20-watt version of this, and he's got a 10-watt little QRP version of something similar to this, but they have BNC connectors on them. Those kits are quite a bit smaller and a little bit harder to put together. So I would recommend being pretty good with soldering small parts before trying to tackle that. Thanks for watching, and if you have any other suggestions, comments, anything, leave them down in the comments section. Please check out one of my other videos. I'll link it up here in the corner. And please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. 73.